Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Makdisi Street podcast. We're very happy to have with us today Alon Mizrahi, who's a writer, analyst, and the host of the YouTube show and Substack page, The Mizrahi Perspective. While he lives now in Canada, but he grew up in a working class Arab Jewish family. His father is from Palestine and his mother is from Morocco. I will post his Twitter handle, or maybe Alon himself can tell us what his Twitter handle is. He's very prolific on Twitter or X, and we highly recommend that you check out his much of his analysis, which appears there as well as on his Substack. And we're happy to have the discussion today in obviously with the Gaza genocide continuing, with the ethnic cleansing operations in the West Bank continuing, but also the attack. The U.S. We're recording this just after the United States attacked Iran, and then the subsequent Israeli attacks in the last 24 hours as well on Iran and Iranian counterattacks into Israel. So I wanted to start off, Alon. First of all, welcome. I just wanted to start off the discussion, and we'll get into other issues, including how Israeli society is and other matters like this. But just what your analysis today is of this war between Israel and Iran, and how you read the Israeli objectives to be, if there are any, since they seem to continuously change from one thing to the other, from nuclear things to regime change to other things. What is the real objective here, and what is where are we now?
I think that the real objective is, psychologically, culturally, politically, the real objective here is to keep Israel always the victim and always the winner. This is the double mission that Israel has, that Zionism always has. And this is what they're doing now on a different scale, because Iran is like the biggest power in the region, the biggest target, the biggest prize as they see it. And this is what they're trying to do now, to keep Israel as the victim and the winner. And I think that already we can start seeing cracks in how Israel can handle this, because this whale is too big for the Israeli boat to hunt and load the Iran. And I think Iran is just starting to get serious about this, while Israel is showing signs of, okay, we're done, let's move on, let's de-escalate. I don't think this is what's going to happen.
In what sense, Alon, is when you say Israeli society is victim? In what sense can you explain what that means, given the fact that the Israelis, obviously in front of the entire world, launched an unprovoked attack on Iran? In what sense are they, you know, is the Israeli government's discourse about being a victim instrumental? And in what sense do people in Israel actually, especially the Jewish Israelis, actually believe that they are actually victims? In what sense are we talking about?
It's a good. You said one thing very important, almost unintentionally. You said Jewish Israelis and not Israelis, and this is a key point, because when we say Israelis, we mean Jews in Israel. We don't mean 1948 Palestinians. No one means people in Al-Fahim when they say Israelis, or Bedouins in the south. So it's a good thing to remember that when we say Israelis, it's just a euphemism for Jews in Palestine. This is what Israelis mean. Um, the idea of victimhood, this is a big and deep question, but it is so deeply embedded into not only Zionism, but Judaism, especially Ashkenazi Judaism. I think Judaism in general, but Ashkenazi Judaism particularly. Um, when I went to school in Israeli institutions, in Israeli schools, the idea of Jews being always persecuted, always hated, always victimized, always singled out is so vital to Israeli consciousness. This is Jewish Israeli consciousness. And Palestinians, I mean, amazingly, despite all the suffering that they experienced, they don't see themselves as victims. They don't talk as victims. They are victims, but they don't have a victim mentality. I've never met a Palestinian with a they can be something like this on a personal level, maybe, but there's no national narrative of victimhood. We are victims, and I think this is very healthy for Palestinians. I think this is one of the secrets of their resilience, and how just strong and flexible and adaptive this society is. But Israel is stuck within this self-image of we are victims, and they feel this empowers them because being a victim gives you license to do whatever. As a victim, you are never seen to yourself. You are never seen as having responsibility for anything. You're just reacting to injustice. And since this view is almost mystical, this has nothing to do with particular events. So much of this is going on in people's imagination, in collective imagination. Because this is mystical and because this is based on imagined stuff, this can go on no matter what happens in real life. So as you commit genocide, as you butcher children, as we can all see, we can actually see it with our eyes, you can still feel the victim in this situation. And this is how deranged Israeli society is. This is how deranged Zionism is. I mean, we can all, the whole world can see it now. Everything is out in the open. Nothing is hidden anymore. But the
Alon,
idea of the idea, just one sentence to finish this, the idea of Jews as victims, and you can see the same with American Jews, and this drives me nuts, even maybe even more than the Israeli story, because the Jews in the U.S. have done spectacularly well. They are everywhere. They are so successful. They own. They have. They are in everywhere. They are in all the places. And in a society where black society and black people has been destroyed for centuries, when Native Americans were annihilated, Jews in the US still see themselves as victims, and they won one legislation after another against anti-Semitism. So this mentality, as an Arab Jew, and maybe we're going to talk about this more in a second. As an Arab Jew, this mentality is very foreign to me. I don't accept it. This is not my story. This is not the story of my people. This is very, very Ashkenazi, and it is very essential. This is the center of Jewish consciousness in the world today. And no matter what happens,
Alon, just I mean, Sally had a question, but I just to clarify something, and it's interesting that I asked a question about what's going on in terms of the Israeli attack in Iran, and we're already talking about the question of victimhood, which is really important, and I think we're going to get into more depth. But just since we're on it, a question which is one can somehow, I mean, for most of us anyway, you can from outside, even when talking about the question of victimhood, one can almost understand it in sort of generational sense. But in the post 1967, in the post 1990 kind of generations inside Israeli society, at least, I mean, is victimhood the issue, or is it more aptly described as a bully culture? I mean, it's something that requires absolute control. I mean, in Lebanon, for example, even in the agreements that the Israelis try to put, it's always surrender. Now the Iranians, you surrender, nothing but total surrender. Is that? I mean, how is victimhood being expressed in that way?
the, if you think about it, a victim is always a bully, and a bully is always a victim. These two are just one and the same. If you have a relationship with other people that based on equality, Even if you believe that someone has done something wrong to you, the way to resolve this, to discuss this, looks a certain way. It's not based on I am weak and you're strong and you're doing this to me and you've always done this to me. This discourse drives people crazy. But to answer your question, in Zionism, there have been two competing schools. One is the secular, classic Ashkenazi liberal Zionist, the Ben Gurion school, you can call it, or Mapai. It's the old mythological party that established Israel and ruled all the establishments for decades. And they saw themselves as rational Europeans who want to create their own European style utopia in Palestine, in the Middle East. And they didn't want to see themselves as victims. They identified victimhood with the diaspora. They wanted to break from this tradition. They saw Jews in Poland, in Ukraine, in Russia, in Germany as victims, as weak, and they wanted to create a new Jew, a new Jewish identity, strong, militarized, muscular, and all of this type of thing. And this school had its run in Israel for a while, and they committed horrendous. I mean, they did the Nakba. They did all the massacres, the Yassin, Kfar Qassem, and so on and so on and so on. But they had this self-image of themselves as being free from historical prejudice and not victims. They had this illusion that once we finish establishing our European utopia in Palestine, we can be just normal people. We can be Western Germans, like when the time there was West Germany. We can be Austrians. We can be French. This is what they aspired to be. But there was another school, the school that didn't want to break free from the Jewish tradition, Jewish religion, Jewish tradition. They wanted to preserve that identity of Eastern Europe, of the big Jewish centers of Eastern Europe. And they loved the idea of victimhood and what comes with it, which is vengeance. Now they have the power to take vengeance, although the Palestinians and Arabs in general have nothing to do with their suffering. The idea is we are taking vengeance against almost all of humanity because we were persecuted and hated by everybody. So now it is our turn to show strength. And this is part of the you surrender and you surrender and you surrender. This is almost an infantile. This is a 2 or 3 year old established themselves as you know, as strong, as dominant in a given social setup. But now we can see that the one school clearly won the debate. Even the liberal Zionist, secular Ashkenazi European school, they lost the debate completely. Now everything is in the name of Judaism and religious Judaism, and this is the Netanyahu school. If the first was the Ben Gurion school, there's the Netanyahu and Begin school, the first prime minister of Israel from the right wing, Menachem Begin. And this school won, I mean, decisively and tragically, because the kind of damage that this philosophy is doing is irreversible. You cannot come back from it.
But Alon, if we can get just a bit further into this question, I mean, what you're saying about Begin and Netanyahu and so forth, of course, I mean, yeah, we don't disagree at all. But the question is, when it comes to the Arab Jewish Zionist presence in Palestine, people like Ben Gvir and so forth, right, who are, I mean, again, to our eyes, looking from the outside in, they seem to be rising to prominence. So what is the relationship between the right wing Likud, Begin through Netanyahu, like that line, which is saying, which is its position is as you just articulated it, on the one hand, with on the other hand the rise of a right wing Arab Jewish Zionist set of politicians and voting bloc and social movements. So in other words, what is the relationship here between the Mizrahi element of this inside the society, as opposed to the traditional Ashkenazi kind of component to it, which is what you just articulated? How do these things dovetail? What tensions do they have with each other? And how are those tensions getting resolved, or are they not being resolved? That would be helpful for us to think through as well.
Okay, this is fascinating. The historical process I'm going to describe now is fascinating. Basically, the Arab Jewish story is in the late 40s, early 50s. Delegates or messengers from occupied Palestine, from the newly founded Israel, came to, because they realized they have won the 1948 war, but they have no people to populate the new country. European Jews didn't want to come to Israel, and traditionally Zionism wasn't very popular among Jews. I mean, we have to remember let's talk before the Holocaust. In 1938, of almost 18 Jews living in the world, there were 300,000 or 400,000 Jews in Palestine. People didn't want to come here. They didn't want to participate in it. And the great majority were Ashkenazi Jews. They wanted to go to America. They wanted to go to Western Europe. They didn't want to come to Palestine. So in 1948, after they won the war, they ethnically cleansed the Palestinians. They took over the land. Now they need to have a country, but they don't have people for this country. And the only resource, the only pool of humans they can bring in are Arab Jews. Europeans are not going to come. The remaining Holocaust survivors, they didn't want to come. American Jews were definitely not coming. Arab Jews were the only, and this is the only stage where they want to include Arab Jews in their Zionist utopia, because they didn't plan to have Moroccan Jews and Iraqi Jews and Lebanese Jews and Syrian Jews. They weren't European. They were inferior and brown. They didn't want to have them. But now they had no choice. So they went to all those communities, especially to Morocco, which was the biggest Arab Jewish or Muslim, it's not Muslim Jewish, but biggest Jewish concentration in a Muslim country. And they basically, within a decade, they emptied the Arab sphere, the Arab geography from Jews. They told them, we are establishing the Jewish, they said the Jewish utopia, not the European utopia. We are establishing the Messiah is almost here. Jews are coming back to their Holy Land, which was a religious dream for Jews for many generations. But they said this is now a reality. Jews are coming back to their Holy Land, and you need to come back and join us now. This is happening now. And many Jews, and they were unbelievably innocent people. They weren't political. They lived their small lives in their communities, and 1,000 communities in Morocco and all other places. And I've been to Morocco. I saw one amazing, beautiful place, a small village where only Jews lived. It's now empty. It's abandoned. And overnight, they came on a Friday, on a Thursday evening, to tell them tomorrow morning we are coming to pick you up at 5 or 6 a.m. We all need to be by the trucks. Basically, this is how they did it. And everyone listened because they believed them that this is now the Jewish dream coming true. And overnight, that place, this amazingly beautiful small village, was abandoned. And this happened in one community after another, and they took all those people and brought them to the newly founded Israel, which was hardly a functioning state at this stage. Once those people landed in Israel, I think that immediately they realized their mistake. Because, for instance, they would tell them, you are going to live in Jerusalem, which was the Jewish dream, again, for many generations. I mean, the Messiah is going to come to collect the Jews from all the diasporas, and a new Jewish kingdom is going to emerge, but God is going to do it, not people. This is like a kingdom come for Christians, or a dream of redemptions for Muslim believers. Or this was it. But Zionism made it a political reality. They were brought into Israel, and they immediately realized that they were lied to. That this was not a Jewish utopia. This was a racist white society where they were to be second-class citizens. And they were not going to live in Jerusalem. And if they lived in Jerusalem, they were sent to the most ruined neighborhoods. And I mean, everyone lived in abandoned Palestinian homes and neighborhoods back then. But they were always sent to the most remote parts of the land. They were marked for manual labor. They can't have political representation. Their language is ridiculed, and they need to get rid of their Arabic, because Arabic is the language of animals. Normal people don't speak. You need to learn Hebrew. And the funny thing is, those people, I mean, they would read the Torah in Hebrew 3 times a week. They could speak Hebrew. They could speak the language of the Bible, the way it sounded, the way it was meant to be spoken, because Hebrew sounds like Arabic. It has similar sounds to Arabic. But in Israel, they didn't want to have those sounds. They didn't want the modern Hebrew to have a ha sound. So when you listen to an Israeli speaker, it's always ha 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 ha. You always hear this ch. But Hebrew originally needs to have ha. But they canceled it. The same with ah. Hebrew is supposed to have ah. But when you listen to an Israeli speak today, you never hear this. It's ah, 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 ah. Ah, ah, ah. But Hebrew is supposed to have, it's a much more varied language. It meant to sound like Arab Jews spoke it. But they were taught the way they sounded was ridiculous. They need to get rid of it. So they did. They had no power in this political structure. They were basically decultured in an amazingly cruel way. They were told their religion was ridiculous, their language was ridiculous, their culture was non-existent. They were brutes. They were basically brutes. And everything they knew in their lives until a minute ago, because they just arrived from Morocco or Yemen yesterday, but everything they had known in their previous lives was now meaningless and unnecessary and very humiliating.
Well, because Zionism alone is Zionism as a nationalist sort of ideology coming from Europe, of course, is predicated on the idea of an antithesis between being Arab and being Jewish. You can't be Arab and Jewish. So I'm wondering, based on what you're saying, how was it possible for Arab Jews or Jews who came from the Arab world, who ended up in Israel, the new state of Israel? how did they become so right, or how do they grapple with this denial of their identity? Did they assimilate into Zionism? Do they see themselves as superior to Palestinians? Do they, and how do you end up with Ben Gvir? Is he the exception, or is he the, how, where does he fit into this?
He is now not the exception. He is now more the rule. But I'm getting to this part. This was the introduction. And when they were decultured so brutally and so wholly, they were left with Zionism as their only means of being part of a society. They could not be part of a society as Moroccans. They could not be part of society as religious people. Their only way to be part of life, basically, is to be Zionists. They could not even get a job without being part of a Zionist party. You needed to be you needed to belong to a party to have medical insurance, to have a job. They had to adapt. There was no choice for them. And once their previous existence was completely denied, they held on to Zionism as their means of salvation. This is the cruel joke of Zionism for Arab Jews. This is like someone basically killing your parents and adopting you as a child, and now you learn to treat them as your parent. This is what they did to them. I mean, this is a harsh example, but this is the reality. So in order to not feel the pain and the shame of everything that was done to them, they became more and more fervent Zionists. It's all part of the denial of the deep pain and shame. And this is not old history. This is my mother. Okay, this is 60 years ago. This is after the Nakba. 10,
What do you mean
15
your
years.
mother? Did she tell you all? I mean, how did she express that?
I mean, this is the generation of my mother. This is her story. This is the story of people her age. She's now almost 80, but there are many parents and grandparents of her age and a little younger who belong to this generation who were born in Morocco. My mother was born in Morocco. She is not an Israeli even. She migrated when she was 12. Her childhood was in Casablanca, not in any part of Israel. I'm saying this to demonstrate how close in historical experience this is. And this psychological torture that those people went through. I mean, the denial of their whole identity and story and relevance and legitimacy. And now you only have Zionism. And I think that because they were not politically organized, and they were not allowed to be politically organized. When they tried to organize politically, they were broken by Israeli Shabak, the Israeli Secret Service, this Israeli FBI or Mukhabarat or whatever you want to think of it as. When they tried to rebel and revolt against the Ashkenazi order, they were punished brutally. The Israeli establishments were terrified of an emergent Jewish Arab political identity. There are actually protocols from government sessions in the 1950s where people say, Ashkenazi ministers from Mapai, they say, if Arab Jews become political, they may join the Palestinians and fight us together. This was their fear of an Arab Jewish political identity. And I think that those people were broken. I mean, some of them were racists, some of them were sadists. I mean, every society has this. But basically, they went through a psychological breakdown and crisis, and they learn to accept Zionism as their religion, as their identity. Because remember, they have nothing else. They don't know what it. I mean, to give you an example, my mother spoke French, English, and Darija, Moroccan Arabic. I don't speak, and my father was born in Palestine. My father's mother tongue was Arabic. I don't speak Arabic. I mean, the Arabic language has been denied from the children of those people. So the parents spoke Arabic, but the children already know very little, and the grandchildren can't speak a word of Arabic. And they are Arabs. They are Arabs. They are from Iraq, they are from Syria, they are from Lebanon, and they are Arabs. They are Moroccan. They can speak a word of Arabic. So when they go into Gaza, they don't meet a human being. They meet a demon installed in their heads, in their consciousness by the Zionist state. And I think that they hate that demon even more because it reminds them of who they really are. This makes this unbearable. You know, when the monster really looks like you and sounds like you, and the woman or the grandmother sounds like your grandmother or your great grandmother, this is unbearable. You hate them more. You hate them even more, and this I think this explains Ben Gvir. This explains Ben Gvir. This is Arab Jews showing the Zionist system that they are not Arabs anymore. So they need to always prove it's. I think a similar thing happens to some Black Americans or Hispanic Americans when they become patriots, when they become MAGA. They become the most absurd and most extreme versions of American racism and stupidity and colonialism. And a similar process happened to Arab Jews.
Alon, if we can ask on a sort of a parallel, and it's a bit different, but it's sort of but it's related, I think. When you look at Palestinian Druze, who are, as you know, conscripted into the army, and some of the most, from as what I understand of it anyway, some of the most vicious and problematic Israeli army units are Druze units, right? So I would imagine you're going to say something similar happens there too, in that these Druze who are, I mean, yes, they're given Israeli citizenship, but they are in fact Palestinians. They speak Arabic. They're in a way they're much more, or they have been much more intimately woven into other Palestinian Arab communities because that's who they actually are, up to the present in a way. They weren't just stripped away from their families in Iraq or wherever, right? So is it a similar kind of dynamic? And do you think then? So the question I'm really asking is there a sense of a sort of racial hierarchy in Israeli society, with still Ashkenazi still at the top, and then part of what that does maybe is then it makes every level anxious about slipping down and wanting to identify with those on top, rather than, on the contrary, identifying with those who are being oppressed so that they can work together against the ultimate oppressor. I mean, does that logic work?
This is a beautiful and perfect description. This is exactly what it is. And it's funny you said Druze, because just a few days ago, there's this whole subculture of people being kicked out of shelters in Israel during bombardments. This is nuts. I mean, this society keeps surprising me with how insane and depraved it is. I mean, I've known it my whole life, and still the new small ways that it comes up with. I mean, and just a week ago, I saw there were some Druze. I don't know, they were doing some work in a building or in a street, and I don't know if it's electricity, gardening, or whatever. And suddenly a siren went off, and they wanted to enter a shelter, as you would in a situation like this. And the someone, a resident in that building, said, "You cannot go in. You don't go in." And he was of so it happened he was Ashkenazi and very white, and this was so symbolic. And in that moment, they were Arabs. I mean, in Israeli imagination, there's no Palestinian or Druze or Egyptian or Lebanese. There's Arab. It's almost a dirty word. It's almost like an N word, but people say it freely. I mean, they're Arabs. The Arabs are coming. The Arabs are doing this. This is our Arab expert, our expert on Arab matters in Israeli media. I mean, think how nuts this is. It's not an expert for Egyptian society. It's not an expert on Lebanon, an expert on Syria, an expert on, I don't know, Sunnis, or whatever. It's an expert on Arabs. He knows everything about all Arabs. And this is the kind of mentality we grew up with. And in that moment, those people were Arabs, and they were, and because he probably heard them speak Arabic, and Jews mostly still speak Arabic in their communities, in their homes. I've had many Druze friends like over the years, and I think that this community also feels deceived and betrayed, because remember, a few years ago, this is how this current round of psychosis began. Almost 10 years ago, they passed the nation law in Israel, and and you had no idea why they felt the rush to do it. I mean, who was threatening the Jewish majority or Jewish supremacy in Israel? Still, they needed to enshrine it in law and to make a law that states that this is a Jewish state, and and this goes to this dichotomy I described before between the Ben Gurion Zionism and the Netanyahu Zionism. Traditionally, the Ben Gurion Zionism stated that Arabic had a formal stand in Israel. It's a formal language in Israel. They respected, and they even taught Arabic in schools. I mean, when my older sister, went to school, she studied Arabic. When I went to school, Arabic was no longer part of the curriculum. This transition between Mapai and Likud, just they Arabic was no longer part of Israeli studies in schools. Um, and they passed this law, and in this law it is stated that Jews and Judaism and Hebrew has the superior place in Israeli society. And the people who protested the most against this were Jews, because they said, we have like sacrificed everything for this country. And I think that initially when the Druze, I'm not a historian on this, but because this came up, when the Druze joined the nascent Israeli forces in 1948 or in those years, I don't think they signed up for a regional supremacist regime. They realized that there was this war going on. We don't want to be part of the Nakba. We don't want our villages to be ruined, and we don't want to be like thrown out of this place. We'll join this, and this will be normal with time. I'm guessing this was their logic. They didn't realize, like 70 years down the road or 80 years down the road, they were going to be part of this insane supremacist project that Israel is now blatantly showing itself to be. So, but now they are in a very problematic place. How do they break away with this? They will be immediately marked as traitors, as Arabs. You see, they are Arabs. They are not really. They are not with us. So Zionism is just so fucked up.
Alon, I want to. I think this is really important kind of context and background for the kind of to try to have insight into Israeli society today. And I want to get us back a little bit to the genocide that's going on in Gaza. We started with Iran. We're going to come back to it, but for the Gaza genocide, in the meantime, it always struck me over these months from the very beginning, and I thought, okay, maybe over time things would change. But the public opinion polls seem to continue to show that a vast majority of Israeli Jews support effectively, in effect, whatever they want to call it, or whatever the questions are, in effect, support the Gaza genocide or genocide in Gaza, and the ethnic cleansing and the Trump plan, as interpreted by Netanyahu, which was an ethnic cleansing plan. Help us, you know, help me understand what that means when nearly 2 years into a genocide, a full-scale genocide, you still have a vast majority of a population that is supporting this. And can you explain from what is the psyche? I mean, I understand. We spent the last half hour. You've given us really important insight into kind of the larger historical and the sociological kind of context to this. But in a very specific moment where it's happening now, it's not post-Holocaust. It's not post. It's happening now. It's unfolding in front of everybody's televisions and phones and everything. We hear stories about, some Israelis say, well, oh, what is it? Something like the Israeli broadcasting, the Israeli TV, whatever, doesn't show images of Gaza, or Israelis don't have access to alternative media. And, I hear things, I just keep hearing things like that. And I think, is this a joke? Is there something going on that I'm not aware of? Is there some kind of total blackout inside Israeli media society that people can't access TikTok and all the rest of it like everyone else, especially when we see Israeli soldiers daily posting on TikTok and on social media the most grotesque pictures and images and laughing and all these things that everybody in the whole world sees now, right? Can you give us insight about what it means that a vast majority of a society 2 years into a genocide still supports it?
I will begin my answer to this question with again a little story that about history. A few years ago, it's almost a few years ago, I met a woman called Ruchama Marton. Ruchama Marton is an Israeli radical lefty. She founded the organization called Physicians for Human Rights in Israel. It's not a peace movement. It is a radical lefty organization which she began to provide medical help to Palestinians in the occupied territories in collaboration with local physicians, not as a white savior organization. She is really truly a radical lefty. And during the March of Return slaughter in 2017 and 2018, I spent time with her. We were friends. We were doing some project together. And she told me the history of her political activity and her organization. And she told me that I believed for many years, that if we just tell people the truth about what's going on, people are going to change their mind. We believe that if we showed people, the brutality of the occupation, I don't need to tell you this, but the audience, people need to hear it. This didn't begin with the genocide. This was brutal and murderous and sadistic for decades and decades. And she told me, my belief was that if we only tell people, that we tell them we show them what's going on. She told me one particular story. I have to tell this story because this is so horrible. She told me about a Palestinian couple from Bethlehem, I think, who could not have a child for like 8 or 9 years. And after 8 or 9 years, the woman finally got pregnant. And on the night that she was starting to have her delivery, and they were trying to get to a hospital from some village in the West Bank, and they came to it was a cold winter night, and they came to an Israeli mahsom, a checkpoint, and they weren't allowed in. And so the soldiers told them, no, you need to go to the other checkpoint, go to that place. And it was in the middle of the night, of this cold winter night. and they went from one checkpoint to another. This Muhammad told me, from one checkpoint to another, and eventually the woman gave birth in that car, and the little baby died from cold. And this was in the 80s. This is not, this is the 80s. This is the reality Palestinians had to deal with for fucking decades and decades and decades. So Muhammad tells me, I believe that if we only told people the truth, they would change their mind. But she told me this after her heart was completely broken, because she realized this was a false belief. This was not going to change anyone's mind. So it's not a lack of information. I mean, and information is not going to change Israelis' minds. I'm going to say something very harsh, which shames me really to my core. But Jews in Israel, I'm not sure I need to even qualify it for Jews in Israel. I'm not sure this is not true about Jews in general. They don't see Arab people as human beings. They see them as cockroaches. They see them as pests. They don't see people getting butchered. They're seeing mice getting exterminated. This is what they see. They don't have a normal human reaction to this. They don't care. You can show it to them 24 hours a day. It might make them sad because the picture looks sad. It's not a happy picture. But they have no empathy for those people because their soul and their psychology has been crushed by this toxic ideology of Zionism. They don't see Arab people as human. And this is the Israeli consensus. This is not extreme right wing. Liberal Jews are exactly the same. There was never any doubt about this. The Palestinians, and if you think about Zionism, they had to become this. The moment they sat in Basel, in whatever year they sat there, in the stupid Zionist
1898.
assembly, yeah,
1897, sorry, 1897.
yeah. When they sat there and they like formed their plan for Palestine, the minute they did it, Palestinians were dehumanized. Because to have a plan for some territory where you don't know anyone, you never been there, you don't speak the language, it means you don't recognize them as human beings. This is what it
But
means.
Alon,
Yeah,
you're talking about a colonial society, and you're talking about how an ideology works in a colonial society,
yeah,
steeped in racism and in racial hierarchy, obviously, as you've been explaining. But I mean, there is we should shift to Iran before the time is up, but there is a shift in global opinion. So the point is that there is global opinion shifting precisely because they are seeing all these images coming out of Gaza. And in that global opinion are many younger Jewish people who are horrified, at least here, people that,
yeah.
around who are horrified by what they are seeing. So are you talking specifically about a colonial society and everything that you've been discussing, as opposed to, do you see what I'm saying? It's because global opinion is in fact shifting. There is a shift taking place.
You cannot have an openly supremacist or hierarchical philosophy like openly for humanity. People are not going to accept this. I mean, the human public as in general, people are not going to accept this. When this is present, I mean, they didn't accept apartheid, they didn't accept Nazi Germany, because this is stupid. This is blatantly wrong. People are not going to even engage with this. So of course, humanity, when witnessing something like this, says no. People say no. This is the normal human reaction. But this is not just a colonial society. This is a colonial society with an added layer of religion and mystical thinking. So they see things from a very twisted and distorted mystical lens. So nothing ever happens in the present, and this is a good lead up to the Iran discussion. Nothing ever happens in the present moment. Everything happens on a symbolic historical plane of time. This is not today. This is the eternal struggle between the good part of the universe which Jews represent, and the bad part of the universe that everybody else represents. And this is part of the eternal persecution of and hatred of Jews. And if you listen to Zionist speakers in the US, this is how they talk. This is how they talk. We have always been hated. You have always hated us. It's about always. It's not about now. And you cannot penetrate it. And people think this way. Nothing can get through to them, because this is not me and you now. This is me and some incarnation of the devil or Satan or Amalek or whatever. It's not personal. It is symbolic. And this is why they can't get it. They can't get that this is about actual people in the present day, that those babies are real, that every baby in Gaza, every child, every woman, every man, every old man, it is that person, it is that particular human being. They can't see that. This is just almost props in a theater production. This is not real. Reality becomes secondary to the mystical vision they have in their minds. And this is a problem I think Jews will have to contend with. And I think this is what young liberal Jews are rejecting. They want to be in reality. They want to be part of life, part of humanity. Don't want to live in this asylum of mystical thinking. They want to be part of life and part of this moment.
So, I don't to push this to, you mentioned this is a good segue to the question of Iran, or the war, the kind of the unprovoked sort of Israeli attack on Iran, and now this kind of war that is spreading, and the U.S. is now involved, and the entire region is sort of waiting to see how this proceeds. In trying to justify this war, leaving aside Netanyahu, on this podcast we've talked a lot about Netanyahu and the kind of the cynical side of it. We've talked a lot about the question of the dog and the tail. Who controls American foreign policy. We've had John Mearsheimer. We've had this discussion a lot.
Yeah.
And feel free to weigh in on this. I mean, who controls American foreign policy when it comes to the Middle East? But the more kind of the question that I have for you is related more to the Israeli society, again, in the context of what we've been talking about. So as far as they're concerned, you would say there's a consensus, not everybody, but there's a kind of general like majority of people who think that this is not only an inevitable war, but a war that it sort of has this larger mystical dimension. This has to happen, without which the Israelis will never be safe. They'll always be attacked. They'll always so this is. And then after Iran, there'll be Turkey, and then after Turkey, there'll be I don't know who, and then after I don't know who, there'll be Pakistan, and then
Pakistan.
sort of
Yeah.
Pakistan will come after that, right? And then we'll go back to Lebanon, because the thing will it'll keep going in waves and cycles. There's always somebody out there. So as we move into this, and we talk about what your thoughts about that, but also does that then mean is Zionism enveloping this way of thinking means presumably that there is no way out. In other words, you cannot have Zionism and a stable, forget just, stable region. Again, we won't even get to the question of justice. That stability is not, you cannot have stability as long as you have a Zionist project that is expansionist in nature, that is genocidal in nature, and that requires constantly needing to have everybody surrender. surrender, 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 surrender. Everybody has to surrender,
Yeah,
and that's
and
not sustainable because people are not going to surrender. You might maybe in one case, but not the other, and then these guys surrender, but the next day they wake up and they no longer surrender. So it's a continuous thing. Please.
uh, this is the last part of what you said. I think is key. This is a culture, an ideology that doesn't respect anyone. This is key. Now, and I didn't see anyone talk about this, but this is so important. I mean, think about the Gulf states, the Arab states that could be devastated over Iran's response to America's aggression. I mean, just like a few weeks ago, Trump was there celebrating, getting trillions in investment, and now is throwing them under the bus for Israel, and Israel is pushing for this, of course. So what is the lesson they learn? I mean, they have cozied up to Israel for years. They do business with Israel. They collaborate. They almost, I can't say they said nothing, but hardly did anything to stop the genocide. They took Israel's side almost completely. And in one instant, they're gone. I mean, if Iran respond, I mean, I'm a believer in Iran's might, military might. Iran is not a simple enemy for anyone. They and especially as we know that Arab populations are not very happy with those regimes, especially vis-a-vis the genocide and the whole subject of what it means politically to be Arab, because this discussion is being like suppressed by those regimes who are friendly to the US and Israel. But I don't think Arab people are happy about it. Egyptians are not happy. Saudis are not happy. They are not happy. I mean, we know this. So given this volatile atmosphere, already volatile atmosphere, and the historical background that we know, for Israel's stupid, unjustified, unprovoked war, the US is willing to throw Saudi Arabia and the UAE and all its friends in the Gulf for an attack on Iran. So no one has any status to continue to answer your question. No one has, and the Israel would do this to the US. If China offered Zionism like a better umbrella and help us fuck up the US, they may do it because they are not loyal to anyone. There is no loyalty involved. There is no like normal assessment of things. It's who gives me the most power, the most whatever reward I need. So there's no stability and there's no normalcy. I mean, if you're Morocco and you say, okay, Israel is an established fact in the region. I'm being the devil's advocate for a second. Israel is an established fact in the region. And okay, I'm going to have some normal relations with it, assuming that with time they will become normal. They will allow for a Palestinian state to be established, for instance. But you see that this is a nonsensical stand because they only get crazier. They will only embarrass you. They will only shame you. There's no like. I mean, I think about Sadat and his peace deal or compromise with Israel. It was based on the idea that now that the biggest threat to Israel has been removed in the form of the Egyptian military, maybe now Israel will become normal. They didn't calculate for Israel to become more insane after. I mean, there are so many points in history, but this is a big one. Israel was supposed, you took out the biggest military threat. No more big wars, because without Egypt, you cannot have a big conventional war against Israel. So why don't you become more normal? Why do you then start like putting the settlement activity on steroids and doing more and more and more of this? And after you being, people try to stop you. People, Saudis make a big, huge peace plan in 2001 or two, with basically a peace deal with the entire Arab and Muslim world on the table. Don't evacuate Palestine. Don't go back to Europe. Keep 1948. Let a Palestinian state live, and we'll have peace with you. We'll have economic ties. We'll have open ties. We'll have cultural ties. There'll be no more military threats, no more terrorism. Israel is not even answering, and it's only getting more and more deranged. So I think that the conclusion of especially the younger political generation, not we don't see it even mentioned among political establishments, is that this was my conclusion years ago, that Zionism cannot be allowed to survive. There cannot be normal Zionism. People understand that this whole normal Israel charade was always a charade. It was fake. They go on like studios and pretend they did this to us, we do this to them, but people realized they were like deceived in a big way and manipulated. And people say, I want nothing with this entity. They have no legitimacy. And I think that, I mean, humanity is getting there. This is not a political organization or setting you can get along with in any way, shape or form.
Along but the question is, just briefly, we can wrap after this. The question is, do you think that this a move towards the end of Zionism and then therefore some kind of just peace in the future and so on, is that to be? I mean, do you think, can that be achieved through isolation, or or must it be achieved, through harsher and more violent means? In other words, can you envisage a non-violent resolution to this crisis, or do you think the end requires something more violent than that? Do you think the fact that, for example, Israel is increasingly isolated, yes, it still has the support of Western governments up to a point, but Western publics, it's pretty much lost, as Karim was saying this earlier, especially younger people.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's sustainable? Because at least my sense, if the three of us talk about this on the show all the time, my sense is that the Israelis have basically, in Gaza especially, and now in Iran too, they've burned their basis for support in the West, which is their lifeline and has always been their lifeline, which is in Western public support. That's gone now. So to me, it seems like they're digging themselves into a deeper and deeper hole. But I don't know. But what do you think? And then we should wrap after that. But what's your sense of how do you see this playing out, and how do you see a just peace, or do you think that that's not possible?
I think
not,
it's
sorry,
not.
I should clarify. Sorry, just to clarify, not peace with Zionism, but I mean a peace so that Jews in Palestine and everybody else, we can all live together in some whatever the configuration is that we're going to end up with.
Okay, my answer to this is, we have to remember this is a white supremacist project, Jewish white supremacist project. So once white Jews, I'm going to speak in very plain terms, once white Jews realize that participating in Zionism is not rewarding to them, it is punishing to them, they will just quit it. So the wealthier Ashkenazi Jews who live in Israel, once they realize that their homes are being destroyed, their reputations are being destroyed, they are not rewarded financially for this, and their place in the larger human society is being denied by Zionism, they will just move on. Because this is not what they signed up for. And this is key. And to answer your question, I think it's going to be a combination of violence, isolation, economic decline, on all of this, and Palestinian resistance, which and Hezbollah resistance. They haven't said the final word yet. I can see an intifada coming in maybe in months, if the Iran war ends, because Palestinians now know that Israel is fully intent on eradicating them, either killing all of them or ethnically cleansing them, and destabilizing Jordan for this purpose. There's no getting along with Zionism. Now everyone knows it. So this puts Zionism in a very precarious position because their cards have been exposed. So Israel is only going to deteriorate in every respect, and I think that what they have started with Iran can be really the what started on October 7th. This is Sinwar. Sinwar started this. This is like the second phase of October 7th. This is going to be a big nail in the Zionist coffin. I think this war with Iran, which they began foolishly, on a whim, without thinking about the consequences. I mean, um, starting a war with Iran now. I mean, can you take it? Do you know what you even entered? Um, And I don't think the involvement of the US is going to help much. I mean, this is not going to be like a simple bombing campaign. This is not going to be Iraq. This is uh, they have opened the gates of hell, I think, for Israeli society. And just to wrap up, because this is so unnatural, people are not meant to live like this. I mean, being on the supposedly nicer side of a supremacist political setup is still not a nice thing. It's not enjoyable to have license to kill people because you belong to a certain set of society. You still suffer psychologically. We are not meant to live a life like this. This is not what we're meant to do here. So what I think is, and this is my like big bang conclusion, there is a suicidal element to this. This is on top of all the craziness and everything that we've described. Israeli society, in a way, wants to be put out of its misery. And this is part of the reason they are going to war with Iran, and everyone supports this. Although buildings are falling in Tel Aviv and all over Israel, and this has just begun. Israelis, Jews in Israel cannot take this anymore. Okay, they seem. I mean, the perception is they have it. They have it good, but they don't have it good. This is a terrible way to live, and I don't think they want this much longer. They know it's not sustainable, and this is their way out of this.
Okay, Alon, I think that's actually a really good point to stop there. I mean, you've left us with a lot of questions, and we could go on for a long time still to so many other questions to talk about. So thank you for joining us, and hopefully we have you on maybe another time to see what happens at the conclusion of this of all these wars. So
Yeah,
thank you
yeah,
very much.
I'll be happy to. Thanks, guys. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Alon.
Okay, guys, I think this was actually a really interesting discussion with Alon. And again, I keep trying to push people to try to figure out what can't we understand about what goes on in Israeli society, in particular, Jewish Israeli society, and there's still this sense of still to this day supporting this genocidal war, and now kind of enthusiastically supporting this the war in Iran, and this kind of general, as we were saying towards the end, which I thought really interesting, which is sort of towards the end saying, or I think we were agreeing, as I understood it, that Zionism ultimately can't accommodate stability, let alone peace, let alone justice, let alone any of this kind of stuff. It has to keep on expanding. It has to keep on creating bogeymen and problems and things, and so and justify it through an insecurity and through victimhood, but at the same time armed to the teeth with the latest technologies, and of course, most importantly, backed by Uncle Sam. So there doesn't seem to be an end until there's an end to this, and this is something I think is an important kind of message or lesson, and I thought that was really interesting. What do you guys think?
I thought it was. I thought one of the most powerful sort of evocations of the kinds of psychological and racial syndromes, simultaneously racial and psychological syndromes in Israeli society that explains a lot. You know, that image that he generated of the, let's say, the Mizrahi Jewish, you know, Israeli soldier in Gaza confronting the other that, you know, he's trying to get rid of, in a way, right? So you have to constantly kill this ghost that is the mirror image of yourself, basically, in a way. That's part of you know, what drives the kind of the mania. I think there is. I mean, I've written a whole book about denial and Zionism. I think there are all kinds of syndromes here that are ultimately, they're never going to be resolved, because they have to do with things that are irresolvable, you know, historically and otherwise, psychologically. But I think the bigger issue is, it's clear. I mean, that point that he was making just in passing about, you know, Sadat and Camp David, the peace deal between the Israelis and the Egyptians in 1979, right? So, like, no sooner, literally, the ink on that agreement wasn't even dry when they invaded Lebanon in 1982. Like, they can't. It's like the chain smoker who lights one cigarette with the butt of the one before. They just go from one to the next. Here we are,
1978, Seti. 1978.
78. Okay,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yes. Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
Israeli invasion of 78. Yeah, you're right. And then again 82 to double down on that. Yeah. So, like, this whole thing, and in Gaza, we've talked about this extensively on this podcast. It's a human calamity. It's a disaster. It's a catastrophe. You know, it's inhuman what's happening to the people in Gaza and the West Bank. More in Gaza immediately right now. But, you know, it's not like they haven't resolved it. They haven't won. I don't think they're going to win, and whatever it means to win under these circumstances, in terms of controlling it and so forth. That's not going to happen, I don't think. And no, that's not even done. And then they open up a whole new front in Iran, which is a much bigger and much more, you know, dangerous, powerful enemy for them. Like, why would you? Why it doesn't make, like, it's a little bit like, you know, you're stuck in one front, so you open up a second front. And in the World War II, we saw what happened with that. I mean, like, that's not a very smart thing to do. Clearly, it's on the expectation that Uncle Sam was going to come in and bail them out. And Uncle Sam, based on what we've seen so far, did his one thing and said, "Okay, the job done, victory accomplished, we win. We've done everything we needed to do. We're done." Leaving them basically still stuck, as they are with Yemen also. So I don't know. To me, it seems, I thought his explanation of these things was you know, powerful. That's on the negative sense. On the positive sense, I want to come back, as we did a little bit with Avi Shlaim, to come back to this discussion of what does it mean to be Jewish and Arab simultaneously. What does it mean to be a Jewish Palestinian? How can we start thinking about those forms of identity, because those are the keys to the future, to a happier and more peaceful future, I think, too. Sama, what do you think?
I mean, clearly there's two parts to this whole discussion, and one part, of course, we've discussed with Avi Shlaim, and the perverse irony, or not irony, but the situation we're in, where there's so much discussion at the idea of being Arab Jewish as if it's some kind of revelation. I'm not saying he said that, but I'm saying in general, it's just, I mean, Christian Arabs, Muslim Arabs, Jewish Arabs, this should not be something controversial. And the fact that it is almost entirely a function of Zionism on the one hand, and of course, you know, colonialism, broader colonialism, French and British colonialism, on the other, and the histories of the 19th and 20th centuries. But in terms of what he was saying, Sadi and Karim, I don't know, this whole discussion about, I mean, there's something very specific. There's something, we've all read Fanon. We've read, you know, all these histories of colonialism and Patrick Wolf and genocidal, you know, settler colonialism and so on. What is distinct here is it, for me, is a question just of the temporality or the chronology, that it's in the 21st century. This kind of 19th century thinking about the other, and the actions, the obliteration of children in Gaza, the kind of cruelty that we're seeing, that everyone in the world can see in Gaza happening right before everyone's eyes, and the shameless and the impunity of it. That's what makes this distinct, because in terms of where we are, not in terms of the structure of colonialism, because the history of colonialism is rife with stories and annals of extraordinary depravities towards non-Western peoples, towards indigenous peoples around the world, isn't it? Just so that's really when I think about what he's saying, I just think about just how perverse it is that this last colonialism unfolds before our eyes in the 21st century, and the damage it's done both to, of course, to Palestinians, but also to Arabs, also to Muslims, also to Jews, Christians in the Middle East. It's extraordinary. And now, of course, Iranians as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to stop. I mean, it's we'll have, hopefully we can come back and have a future conversation with him and with others.
Karim is muted.
No. I think this.
did you want to
I
add
think,
something?
as you're saying, I think this is a good place to stop. There's a lot more to talk about, and we'll obviously going to be continuing this. So thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.